and welcome to What the Fuck is a Prep? We're going to be going over today what you can expect from a prep and kind of like the main aims. We won't be going over how to write your own prep because that is incredibly person dependent. It is also very much coach dependent because there's no right or wrong way to write a prep. But what we are essentially doing is helping to demystify thoughts, feelings and aims within, because often we throw around, oh, I'm prepping, or I'm in peak week, or I'm tapering, but what do those things actually mean and what are we aiming to get? So hopefully this video is going to help you. So prep in a nutshell is not about getting stronger, okay? It is about showcasing strength on the one specific day that is your comp day. So you will find during prep that your actual strength won't get any more, but we want to make sure that we can express that on the comp platform. Peaking is all about reducing fatigue whilst maintaining the strength so that your performance rises at the right time. And we've got a lovely little graph later on to kind of visually help you work out what that looks like. Because your performance is your strength minus the fatigue that you are building. So throughout your prep, you want to be accumulating a level of fatigue so that we can wash that fatigue off you and then you can express the highest amount of strength that you have got on the platform. You want to make sure that you are peaking for the platform, not for the gym. So the aims of a comp prep is all about maximizing the strength expression, minimizing your fatigue, peaking at the right time and practicing comp standards if you're not already in your training. But my biggest recommendation is to always practice any comp spec lifts with the commands. It's all about optimizing your performance and not developing your performance. So again, it's all about making sure that you can showcase your strength rather than continuing to develop your strength. That is for an off-season work. So it is really important to remember, you do not get medals for gym PBs. As much as they feed the ego, look good on social media, make you feel good, they will not get you PBs on the platform, okay? The aim is to total the most on the platform, on the day, okay? So platform strength and gym strength, two separate things. They are not the same thing, which is why if you're any of my athletes, you should be tracking both gym PBs and comp PBs, okay? They're two different things. So what does peaking mean? And this is a really good visual that I like to use quite often, but peaking is the reduction of fatigue whilst maintaining strength so the performance rises at the right time. And this is incredibly person dependent. Every single person takes a different amount of time to reach that peak performance here. On the one side, so this is where you are peaking up into your taper. We've not got enough fatigue built, so there's no need to taper and you're probably going to match what was done in the gym. So if you end your prep over here, you probably won't see any PBs. On the flip side of that, if we've taken you too far over the top, you've usually got too much fatigue, you've probably hit PBs in the gym, but the likelihood is you can't replicate that on the platform, and that is because you have reached over the top of this nice little hill and we are in the recovery stage. So it's really important that we time it as close to this peak performance as you can. So the method, I'm going to move me over here, there we go. The method that I choose to use as a coach is called a linear periodization model. However, I have adapted it based on a few things that I have noticed from the bog standard linear periodization model, okay? I'm not claiming to have invented this, it is just something that I have received a lot of feedback over the years, and I feel like this is very important to remember. So, as the weeks go on with a linear periodization model, volume trends down. So your volume is your blue line here. Intensity trends up, which is your red line. Specificity increases, so your exposure to heavy singles, and your fatigue needs to be managed strategically throughout the whole thing, okay? And when we hit competition day, you should have your peak performance. At no point throughout a linear periodization method are we just randomly training, and actually in all of powerlifting, you are never just randomly training. Every shift in volume and intensity has a very specific purpose. So it's really important that you're continuously feeding back to your coach about how you're feeling and how things are moving so that you can adapt things if you need. Now, the reason that I like a linear periodization model is for a couple of different reasons. The main one that I really like as a coach who typically works with like newer lifters, it gives a level of predictability to someone's prep so that the lifter feels in control. It takes a lot of trust for you to not understand a prep and to just go into it week in, week out and keep ticking the boxes. Whereas this method that I like to use means that people can kind of see the long-term training with it, and therefore you really understand where you're going over the weeks that you'll be in prep. It's also really easy to adapt depending on how the lifter is performing, particularly if it's like your first or your second prep with me. We are still collecting a lot of data as to what works well and how you peak the best, which means that we can go in and adapt it pretty quickly and very easily. My adapted version also gives you more exposure to heavy singles so that you can continue developing and building the skill of a heavy single, because it is a skill. And it also allows us to be incredibly reactive. If you're having a week where work stress is really high, for example, so the weights are feeling heavy, we can be reactive in the sense of, as long as you're hitting the RPE, we can pull things and change things around to make sure that we are still very much on the timeline of your prep. And the reason that I like doing this is because you have an increased neurological efficiency around it. You get to develop your skill under heavy load with more exposures. And you also get a lot more confidence when it comes to things like your openers and your second attempts as well. Now, there are 4 phases to a linear periodization model. You will not go through all phases every single time due to a multitude of different reasons. It comes down to whether you are male or female, how heavy your lifts are working up to be, how long your prep is, how well your fatigue is managed, any externals, so things like stress, whether you're cutting or maintaining weight. There are so many different factors that come into writing someone's prep, so you will not always go through all 4 phases, but it's a very interesting kind of phase and development for you to understand. So phase 1 is called the accumulation or the early prep, and the goal of this one is to maintain or even look at developing the basis of your strength. So this is where that weakness methodology comes in, where if we can improve your weaknesses, you're going to come in with a stronger foundation, which will play in very nicely later on in prep when we get more sport specific. This one's going to have a moderate intensity with it, so you may have like RPE 6, 7s, 8s. You will have a higher volume with this one. Typically you're looking at like your compounds being in like sets of 5. So we don't have a very big amount of sport specific work with this just yet. You are still going to have your variations to hit the weaker areas, and during this as well we will be building your work capacity. Powerlifting platforms are getting a lot faster, so you need to be able to recover quicker and adapt better, and that is where we can start to implement it straight from the get-go. So phase 1 is all about reinforcing strength and your positioning due to more time under the barbell. Now, phase 2 is all about the intensification. So this is kind of like the mid-prep, and this is where we start to shift towards more heavy competition work, so your heavy singles start to make an appearance. Volume begins to drop off when it comes to compounds, so you definitely at this stage in the game will not be seeing sets of 5. You'll probably be seeing more things like triples, doubles and singles. The intensity of your compound work will be higher because your rep range has reduced. You're going to have more competition spec lifts, and also your top singles will start to be introduced during this phase. And this is where things start to feel a little bit more real. Singles are being practiced, but remember, we do not max out during prep ever. Stage 3 is your realization / your peak. So this is kind of like the final 2 to 3 weeks. Again, person dependent. And the goal for phase 3 is to just express the strength. So you're going to have incredibly low volume with your comp spec things. So think like 3 top singles or a top set in your back downs, all with singles, doubles, triples. high intensity, but it's all going to be controlled. And by intensity, we mean weight on the barbell. And fatigue management, it should be there throughout the whole of your prep, but during phase 3, it becomes a massive, massive priority, because as the intensity shifts up, the fatigue in your body also shifts up. So it's really, really important that you're able to look after that. We are sharpening the skills during phase 3, so becoming incredibly sport specific, but we are not killing you off, and that is the important thing. If you find that you are not recovering correctly, that is where that communication needs to happen between you and your coach. Then phase 4, otherwise known as the taper. Now the taper happens at a different time for every single person. I have very much noticed that men need a longer taper than women do. So for one of my guys, they may start their deadlift taper 10 days out, but their bench taper starts a lot sooner, probably something like 5 days out. Whereas my females, they typically start their deadlift tapers maybe like 6 days out, whereas their bench tapers can happen 4 days out. So again, it's very, very person dependent, and the goal of the taper is to remove fatigue that we do not need. So you will see a drastic reduce in volume. This is often a week where you will get your openers, so you can practice that, because in theory your openers should be something that you can triple quite easily, so it's not going to be too difficult for you. You are going to get some continued light exposure to variations and accessories, just to make sure that we keep that movement going on. So you will be maintaining your movement patterns. You will not see any new adaptations happen in this taper week, because again, it's all about washing off the fatigue. We do not want to be adding in new stimulus that the body has to recover from. You will not get stronger in this final week. You will, however, get fresher, and you will feel better by the end of it. So the feelings of each phases, the early peaks are the first up to 4 weeks. Tired but strong. This is going to feel more like your normal style of training, because you do have a higher volume when it comes to your training. Mid-peak, the heavy weights are going to start to feel a little bit better, because you're taking similar weights that you were doing and doing it for doubles, triples or singles, so you're actually not moving the weight as frequently, so it's going to feel a little bit better. By the time the late peak comes, this is often when you are going to feel flat, feel very tired, quite lethargic. This is unfortunately very, very normal, but you do need to be aware of kind of when you've gone too far, and again, that's person dependent. Feeling flat before your comp is very, very normal. You just have to trust that the taper is going to wash off the fatigue that you are feeling, so that obviously on comp day you can come in at the strongest you have ever felt. So the volume and intensity drops for a couple of reasons, and it works in this nice little cyclical, I don't know. So the volume creates fatigue, intensity creates fatigue. Fatigue is where the strength hides, okay? If you are feeling fatigued, you're not going to be able to express your strength in as much kind of oomph as you would like to. So in order to show your strength, we got to reduce the fatigue. Easiest lever to pull is reducing volume and reducing intensity. Now, the importance of heavy singles. Heavy singles are for skill under max load, so skill acquisition when it comes to heavy singles. Nervous system exposure, because we don't often touch heavy singles in our powerlifting training, so it's very, very important that our body is used to that. Confidence, because a very, very large amount of powerlifting is mental strength and the confidence under the bar. And also for a certain amount of people, attempt selection practice is really, really important. Again, think the week practicing your openers. They are not, and this is very, very important, they are not weekly max outs, they are not ego lifting, and it is not a chance to test your 1 rep max. You really have to hold off on doing that and making sure that when it comes to your testing of your comp max, it happens on the platform, not before. You want to think of your heavy singles as more of a dress rehearsal for the big day rather than the show day, which is obviously your comp day. Now, some common mistakes that I see during prep, okay? This is one for if you are prepping yourself at all, but cutting volume and intensity too early. If you start to feel fatigued and tired, it is quite likely that you're going to want to pull too soon, and you really have to make sure that you hold out. It's like a really weird game of like chicken, whether or not you're going to pull that intensity too early, not early enough. You have to be right on the money with it. Maxing out or overshooting RPE. If you do that, if you cast your mind back to this graph that we did, so if you max out or overshoot your RPE, the likelihood of you being this side of this strength curve for your comp is incredibly high. In fact, I would put very good money on you being on this side. So it's super important when it comes to prep that you stick to the prescribed RPE or percentage base that you're using. Another one is ignoring fatigue signals. If you cannot seem to get enough sleep, your joints are hurting, you're constantly starving, you cannot focus, you are relying on caffeine far too much. These are all really big fatigue signals that something is not quite right. Either your training is too intense or you're not recovering correctly. And that is when you need to have good communication with your coach to make sure that you both understand what's going on. There's going to be a line. Some people can deal with a lot more fatigue than other people, and that is where each prep is going to be incredibly person dependent. Changing technique late in prep. This is very common, especially if it's early on, because you want everything to be perfect. So your Instagram feed becomes completely filled with, here are my top 3 deadlift hacks, or this is what you're doing wrong to your deadlift. Do not watch them. For the love of God, do not watch them, because all it is going to do is massively confuse you when it comes to your own technique. These videos that you're seeing on Instagram are incredibly generalized, so making sure that you stick to your own technique that you have been practicing for the last however many months, because that is going to be ingrained in your muscle memory. Another thing is trying new equipment last minute. Please do not go and buy a new pair of sleeves during prep. It is just not going to be a good idea. A new pair of sleeves is something that you want to be trying pre-prep within your training so you can get used to them. And then the final thing is panicking when sessions feel off. This is unfortunately just part of life. Sessions will not always feel good, unfortunately. You will not always come out feeling on top of the world. You just need to look at it as a data collecting session. Feedback how it felt, work out why. Did you sleep well? Did you get your food in correctly? Was your pre-workout meal too early, or was it not enough carbs? All of these sorts of things are going to have effects on why a session feels off. There is usually a reason, and that is when you come and talk to your coach and work out what happened. Now, the psychological component, because as much as powerlifting is a physical sport, so it's a strength sport, it is as much mental as it is physical. Okay, so part of the prep that is the psychological things is your confidence comes from specificity. Okay, so this is the introduction of your singles and your commands. If you are whacking out comp singles week in, week out, leading up to your comp, you are going to be super confident in your ability to express your strength through that single lift. Rehearsal also reduces anxiety. If you get to comp and you realise that you've not been practicing like your start command for bench if you're competing with the WRPF, that is going to mean that you're going to have a lot more anxiety over bench than you normally would. So making sure that you're rehearsing in your commands are really important to keep the nerves and the anxiety a little bit lower. Your routine during prep matters. Can you keep your wake up times and your bed times the same? Can you keep your meal routine the same? All of these sorts of things are just going to mean that you can tick off the boxes for prep without having to think about it too much. Visualizations, in my humble opinion, are really underutilized. On like Spotify and YouTube and things like that, you can actually listen to like motivational speeches, or there's some like manifestation work in there as well, if that's your kind of thing. All of these sorts of things are going to lead to you having a better, more positive mental attitude towards the comp, which in turn is just going to positively affect your comp day. And then meet day strategies. If you have a handler or a coach, this is typically already sorted for you, but going in knowing exactly what you're meant to be doing throughout the day is again going to massively reduce the anxiety, because you know what's going to be happening. Now, my biggest top tip, if you are watching this and you have never competed before but you want to, go to a comp and watch before you go into your first prep. I would also definitely say if you are competing with a certain fed, go and watch a comp with that fed first of all. The reason being, again, you are going to walk in knowing what to expect, knowing what the day looks like. You're going to recognise friendly faces, and all of these things are just going to lead towards having a much better comp day because the anxiety is going to be lower and you just get to enjoy yourself. Now, this is what I need from you as your coach. So if you're watching this and I'm not your coach, I would definitely look at kind of implementing these things in a way that you can, that works well for you. But I need honest RPE reporting. This is telling me whether something was actually an RPE 7 that was prescribed, or did it come in too heavy, and if so, making sure that we adapt that as that goes. I need 7 to 8 hours of good quality sleep. If you are running on 5 hours, this is not going to work, nor is powerlifting going to last. Nutrition, consistency. You need to be making sure that you are eating to fuel, having your pre and post workout meals as they should, and making sure that you're having nice, consistent calorie and macro days. If you're having some days that are super high and some days that are super low, that means that your energy availability during training is also going to look like this, which means that peak and prep is not going to be fun. Body weight stability is also really, really key that comes into nutrition consistency. If we can keep that nice and stable throughout prep, it means that going into things like your weigh-ins and actually on comp day, it is going to be a lot easier. You need to just kind of trust the process. A why question is always a fantastic time, but if you're sat there in the gym wondering, like, is this actually going to work? You're just going to end up getting in your head. The first one is always the hardest to trust the process, but it is definitely one of those things that as long as you've got good communication, you and your coach are going to make it work. And no extra cheeky little max outs. I have heard it time and time again where other athletes max out before comp and then completely ruin their comp because of it. Stick to the plan. If you are worried that you are falling behind, communicate with your coach. That is exactly what they are there for. But maxing out is, I think, arguably one of the worst things that you can do leading into comp. And here are my final thoughts. So there is no right or wrong way to do a prep, which is why we didn't go into today exactly kind of how to write a prep, because there's multiple different ways. But the first few times that you prep with a coach will be a learning curve for both of you. You cannot expect your coach to know how to prep you perfectly on the first time, because no one knows how your body is going to react until you do it. Preps get better over time, the more data that can be collected. So again, the more communication that you can have with your coach, the better your preps are going to be. And I want you to enjoy it as much as possible and give all the feedback to your coach. One thing to you that could seem like really small and negligible could actually be really key to making your prep even more successful. So the more that I know as your coach, the better that your prep will go. So I really hope this video was helpful. If you do have any questions, make sure you just drop me a message and I'll obviously be more than happy to help. But prep doesn't have to be this big scary thing. It's just kind of understanding where you are in correlation to everything else that is going on externally. So good luck in your prep. And like I said, you know where I am if you need me.